Okay, welcome. We got question one here. It's 2011 July. It's criminal law. And this is one of the unique criminal law questions where the examiners do not tell you specifically what they want you to discuss. Generally with criminal law, the examiners will lay out the specific issues they want you to discuss. Here, you got to come up with them. But if you think you need a checklist, if you think you need a template, if you can't spot the crimes that are going on here, you have no business taking this exam, because they make it so obvious and so easy on what crimes are being committed that the issue spotting is not an issue. Okay, let's look at the call to question, because that's the first thing we do, always do, is go to the call to question. It says, what crimes, if any, have Dan, Eric, and or Fred committed? So, because criminal law, the whole purpose of criminal law is to, you've probably heard this one before, focus on the defendant's intent. What did the defendant intend to do? Because criminal law punishes act and intent. You have to have an evil motive, and you have to act on it. That's the act and intent. So we punish people for that. You don't just punish someone for having an evil mind. You have to act on it. We've all thought horrific things, and for those of you that haven't, screw you. You live a little bit. I mean, kill someone, do something, like commit a crime. It's quite thrilling. I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's take a look at each individual. So we have Dan, we have Eric, and we have Fred. And each one of them will be discussed in turn. How do you organize it? For those of you who have trouble with organizations, they just told you, Dan, Eric, and Fred. This is not rocket science. Again, it's a state licensing exam testing minimum legal competence. Not that hard. All right, take it from the top. And Vicky operates a successful retail computer sales business out of the garage of her house. Okay, so she's selling computers out of her home. And that's important because this is her house. She lives here. She sleeps here. At common law, you can already tell that this is a dwelling. So it's either going to be arson or burglary, because at common law, why is a dwelling important? It's important for those two crimes. So either someone's going to break into her house or someone's going to burn her house down. It's going to be that simple, or they're going to do both. Vicky told Dan that she intended to go on vacation some days later. This is why you shouldn't post on social media where you're at when you're there, because people like me will come in and rob your house. Well, at least me in my earlier years. Okay, and if you believe that, you'll have to think about it for a while. Dan subsequently informed Eric of Vicky's intended vacation plans out of his plan to take all of her computers while she was away. Now, let's take a look at that sentence one more time. And again, if you haven't read this fact pattern yet, pause the tape, listen to this at least 3 times, read the fact pattern at least 3 times so that you can become fully informed with what's going on with the facts. It is so important. I'll probably say this more times than you want to hear it, but hopefully it'll stick one of these times. Read the fact pattern slowly and carefully and read it multiple times. It's so important to do that to understand what's going on. Look what it said. It says, Dan subsequently informed Eric of Vicky's intended vacation and of his plan to take all of her computers while she was away. He's not asking him to come with him. He's just telling him of what's going on. That's why it's not solicitation. A lot of people discuss solicitation for Dan, and the examiners were not looking for it. Here's solicitation. Hey, would you kill my wife? That's solicitation. Hey man, would you like to rob this bank with me? That's solicitation. I'm going to go rob this bank. That's not solicitation. That's what's going on here. Now, why am I mentioning that? How does it factor in? What if you do talk about solicitation? It's not the biggest deal in the world. You're just wasting time. And because this is question 1, people that end up doing that end up bringing up issues that aren't there, end up going overtime and then shooting themselves in the foot for essays 2 and 3 or essays 4 and 5 or whatever the case is. So be careful with that. Now, I agree. My first glance, my first read, I thought it was solicitation. But looking at it again and reading the fact pattern again and carefully, oh, he's just informing him. So if you want to bring up solicitation and knock it down, that's fine. The examiners just weren't looking for it, FYI. Eric told Dan that he wanted nothing to do with taking in the computers. So we talk about the conspiracy between the two of them. And you can discuss conspiracy either under Eric or under Dan. Either one is fine because For common law of conspiracy, you need an agreement with the intent. There is no agreement here. So there's no agreement to commit a conspiracy. And even if you talked about solicitation under Dan, hopefully you'll dovetail it with conspiracy on how, well, Dan did not solicit him, number one. He didn't ask for his assistance. He didn't ask for any encouragement or, hey, do you want to commit the crime with me? There's no conspiracy, there's no agreement. And at common law, the conspiracy was complete upon the agreement. Modernly, and this is on the MBEs, that the MBE says at common law conspiracy, a common law conspiracy just required an agreement. Whereas modernly, and they'd have to give you a statute on the MBE or the essays you want to discuss it in general, you need an overt act. So plus overt act, and that's modernly. Okay, so there's no agreement between the two, so clearly there's no conspiracy, and you can discuss it under Dan or Eric. It actually went under Eric, you'll see why in a second. Although that doesn't matter in terms of where you organize it. Students often say, oh, I have trouble organizing, or it's my writing. No, that's the most absurd two things I've ever heard. Because number one, it doesn't matter, again, if you put conspiracy here or there. And organization, really, you can't organize Dan, Eric, and Fred. And even if you did put Fred, Eric, and Dan, or Fred, Dan, and Eric, who cares? As long as you discuss it properly under each one, organization doesn't matter. And when someone says it's their writing, oh, it's my writing that's the problem. You mean you just don't know it. That's all it is. Because it's not your headings, it's not your rule statements, it's not the fact that you can't write a sentence, because we've all been writing sentences since first grade. It's the fact that you can't apply the law to the facts, and you don't understand what the fact pattern is saying. So the exam is testing your knowledge of the law and how you apply it to a fact pattern. And it's either you know it or you don't, period, at the end. Okay, so there's no conspiracy here, clearly, of that. Eric told Dan that he wanted nothing to do with it, but that Dan could borrow his pickup truck if Dan needed to take it to carry away the computers. Aha! So for Eric, he's an accomplice. So accomplice is someone who gives aid or assistance. It's aid or assistance plus intent to help. It's just the intent to help. Let me explain the difference to you. You come over to my house and you say, hey, Jason, can I borrow a baseball bat? And I give you a baseball bat. No crime. No, even if you use that baseball bat to club my neighbor, because I had no intent to do anything. Now you come over to my house and you say, Jason, can I borrow a baseball bat because I want to club your neighbor? And I say, sure. I give you the baseball bat, knowing what you're doing. Now I'm an accomplice. I've now made it easier. I've facilitated. I gave you aid or I've assisted you to commit the crime, and I knew the crime was going to be committed, so I had the intent to have the crime be committed. Whereas the first example, there was no intent. You come over to my house and you say, hey, Jason, you want to come with me to beat up your neighbor. Now you're soliciting me, and if I agree, we have a conspiracy. So that's the difference between conspiracy and an accomplice. Accomplice is someone who gives aid. Conspiracy is an agreement. So you can give someone aid without having an agreement with them. So here, what's going on with Eric is Eric has not agreed to commit the crime with him, but he has made it easier for Dan to commit the crime. That's why Eric is an accomplice and not a co-conspirator, and that's what the examiners are looking for under Eric. So again, it's not your writing, it's not your organization, it's not your headings, it's did you know that, yes or no? That's what the examiners will ultimately grade you on. Okay, while Vicky was scheduled to be away on vacation, Dan borrowed Eric's pickup truck. There's the facilitating the commission of the offense. Late that night. Oh, now they're talking about nighttime. We've already had a dwelling, I mean, you don't need a checklist to realize what's going on here. We're going to have a burglary. Okay. When he arrived, late that night, Dan drove the truck over to Vicky's house. Okay, let's say you don't know the elements of burglary. How you don't know this, I have no idea. But we've been learning burglary since it's one of the few rules that students are able to spit out with pretty much ease. Okay, let's take a look. We have night, because it says late that night. Going to Vicky's house. We have a dwelling. If you watch carefully, in these fact patterns, they'll actually give you the elements of every crime in the facts. If you read the facts carefully, you'll start seeing it. And it's so weird how that just becomes so vivid once you can notice it. Late that night, the nighttime element of burglary, drove her to Vicky's house. She lives there. We have the dwelling. When he arrived, he went into the garage, by pushing a partially open side door all the way open. He went into the garage. He entered. And by pushing it, he's breaking. Okay, let's talk about the breaking element. Breaking means that you use any type of physical force to get into the structure. And that means even opening up the handle of an unlocked door. That's a breaking. The only way it would not be a breaking is if the door was wide open or the window was wide open and you just went through. That would not be a breaking technically at common law. So here it's breaking because he pushed open a partially closed side. By just using that little bit of force, there's the breaking. And it says he went into the garage, there's the entering. And why did he go in there? What was the whole purpose? To steal things. Said the intent to commit a felony or a crime on the inside. Intent to commit a crime at the time of the entering. There you go. There's all the elements of burglary. They just gave it to you. So if you can just stay calm and read carefully, it'll come to you. Okay. Vicky, who had returned early from her vacation, was awakened by the noise in her garage. Don't forget, this is at night. She is living there, so we have the dwelling and the nighttime element satisfied. Opened the door connecting the garage to the house. Again, because the door from the garage connects to the house, you can tell this is her dwelling. And stepped into the garage. When she saw Dan loading the computers in the back of his truck, he has now picked up the computers and loaded them into his truck. So that's going to be larceny. So larceny is a trespassor, that means non-consensual taking of the property of another with the intent to permanently deprive. It's just you're stealing their property. In layman's terms, you're just stealing it. So the question is, does larceny and burglary merge? The answer is no. You can be convicted of both crimes. I'll tell you why. Can you break into someone's house to burn their house down? Yes. There's the intent to commit the crime inside. Can you break into someone's house to murder them? Yes, that happens a lot. Can you break into someone's house to rape them? Yes. So there you go. That's why it can be burglary and rape, or burglary and arson, or burglary and larceny, or burglary and murder. So it's the intent to commit a crime inside. But it just so happens that most people break into your house to steal things. Okay. So we have larceny because he's obviously intending to commit, he's taking the property that doesn't belong to him. When she saw Dan loading the computers in the back of his truck, she stepped between Dan and the truck and yelled, "Stop, thief." Wouldn't be defamation because it's true. Dan pushed Vicky out of the way. Okay, by pushing him out of the way, he has committed a battery. All right? Hope you don't need a checklist to figure out that that's a battery. And they don't need a checklist to realize he's stealing her property. And you don't need a checklist to realize he just broke into her house. So breaking into someone's house, stealing someone's property, pushing someone, there you go. There's the three crimes. But by the way, larceny plus battery equals robbery. So it's either going to be a larceny and a battery, or it's simply going to be a robbery. Because robbery is larceny plus force or threatened force. So if I threaten you and you give me your property, like I'm going to shoot you, you give me your property, that's a threat of force. If I actually beat you up and take your property, that's force. So the question is, did he use force to acquire the property or to immediately retain possession of the property? And the answer is, it's a robbery because he used force to immediately obtain possession. It was within the presence of the victim. She was right there. She could have stopped it if he didn't push her out of the way, and therefore he used the requisite force to be a robbery. So the larceny and battery will merge into the robbery. Can you discuss one, both, or you're going to end up discussing all of them in general, even if you discuss robbery only, because robbery is larceny plus battery, as long as you realize that. So larceny and battery would merge into the robbery. If you find there's no robbery, which would not be the best analysis, in fact, it'd be incorrect, it would just be larceny and battery. Anyways, you can see how that's going to come in together. So what crimes has Dan committed? Burglary, burglary, and robbery. Larceny and battery kind of go together. There you go. Dan's only committed 2 crimes, but you're going to end up discussing 4. Okay. So he pushed her out of the way, ran in the truck, and drove off. There's the intent to permanently deprive. He's not planning to give the computers back, nor did he think they were his computers, so he's not taking it under a claim of right. He immediately went to Fred's house. And by the way, so Eric's out of the picture now. So what has Eric done? Eric's an accomplice. Well, is that in the analysis for Eric? The answer is no, because Eric's liable for all foreseeable crimes for being an accomplice. Well, what was foreseeable? The burglary was clearly foreseeable because he told him, I'm going to go break into her house and take it. The larceny was clearly foreseeable because he said, I'm going to break into her house and take her property. Now, the only thing that may or may not be foreseeable, and this is where the analysis and the discussion actually lies, is was it foreseeable that Dan would have to use force to acquire the property? Meaning, is he going to be liable? Can Eric be responsible for the robbery? And at first glance, you want to be like, well, no, because she was supposed to be on vacation. It was supposed to be all hush-hush, is secretive. No one was supposed to know. No one was supposed to be there. And that's fine. That's the fine analysis, and you could actually write that. But I think the better analysis is, and again, there is no right answer on this one, but I think the better analysis is, and both answers and the one-timers model answer do discuss this, is that any type of burglary, there is a chance that an alarm's going to get tripped, her vacation plans will change, someone will see you break into their house and call the police, or they might try to stop it themselves, and that force might be used to end up acquiring the property. So it turns out that it is foreseeable that a robbery would occur, and it also is foreseeable that when you're committing an inherently dangerous crime, that someone might actually die. So believe it or not, he could be an accomplice to murder if somebody actually was killed here. But nobody was killed. But then again, that example makes it a lot more, it makes it much more clear why the robbery is foreseeable under these facts. So Eric's guilty as an accomplice and an accomplice to burglary and robbery. So Eric's on the hook for those two. Now finally, we're going to have Fred. So Fred's house, where they told Fred what happened. So Fred clearly knew what Dan had done. In exchange for two of the computers, it's consideration. There's an exchange. He's receiving the stolen property. That one may not have been as easy to catch. So receipt of stolen property requires the property be actually stolen, and you must know it's stolen. How does Fred know it's stolen? Because Dan just told him what happened, that I just stole these computers. So receipt of stolen property. He received stolen property. That's one. And he says, in exchange for the two computers, Fred allowed Dan to hide the truck behind Dan's house. Why is he hiding the truck? That is an accomplice after the fact, or an accessory after the fact. An accessory after the fact, which is not the same as accomplice over here. It's actually better as accessory after the fact. It's also known as, and this is the easiest way to remember it, harboring a fugitive. So it's when it's a felon, you have to know the person, it has to be a felony being committed. It's like I'm not trying to, no one's looking for you if you steal a candy bar at the grocery store. So harboring a fugitive is an accessory after the fact. It's when you hide somebody, or you try to prevent them from being arrested, apprehended, convicted, or whatever, and for the purpose of actually doing that. Well, what's the whole purpose of hiding the truck behind your house? So he doesn't get caught. So therefore, Fred's guilty as being an accessory after the fact. So pretty much a quick little recap on this. Dan has committed a burglary and robbery. Eric is an accomplice to burglary and burglary and robbery. Fred is guilty of receiving stolen property and accessory after the fact, also known as harboring a fugitive. And that's it. Not the most difficult question. It was 2011 July question 1 for criminal law. Thanks for listening.